Hey everyone, Darren here, and welcome to the 11th part of the Tales of Retrospective, and this particular review will be of one of my least favorite Tales games. Yes, I'm not particularly fond of Dawn of the New World, which is considered a spin-off title but a canon sequel to the events of Tales of Symphonia. I'll be getting to the specifics of my disdain shortly, but let's cover the general information first. Tales of Symphonia Dawn of the New World originally released in North America on November 11, 2008, a few months after the release of Tales of Vesperia. But in Japan, the game was released 2 months prior to Vesperia. It's also important to note that many of the senior members of the Tales studio, specifically those who worked on Tales of Symphonia, were working on Vesperia. So, Dawn of the New World's development team was lacking those who worked on Symphonia, which as you may guess is problematic. But that aside, as per usual, the game was published by Namco Bandai and developed by their Tales studio, released for the Nintendo Wii. Normally at this stage of the review I'd begin going into the details, but I need to cover something first. I believe that having two Tales games being developed during the same period affected the quality of the final product, as Tales of Vesperia is a main Tales title and would have received more attention than Dawn of the New World, since it was a spin-off. I cannot prove this as a fact, but I think having the two games being developed by the same studio at the same time would impact the end result, and that impact can be seen throughout all of Dawn of the New World. But I digress. Let's move on to the story and characters. It's nearly impossible to summarize the plot of Dawn of the New World without revealing minor spoilers to Tales of Symphonia's story, so I'll keep the specifics to a minimum. The game is set 2 years after the events of Symphonia and begins during a raid on the town of Palmacosta. This raid is being led by the previous game's protagonist, Lloyd Irving, and we see him kill civilians in cold blood. This raid is the product of two different factions that are on the brink of war. Dawn of the New World's primary two protagonists, Emil and Marta, were caught in the crossfire of the raid on Palmacosta and now bear a grudge towards Lloyd. So, as the story begins, we have the game's last protagonist being the villain and our two new heroes after him. And for someone such as myself who loved the original game, this initial premise really intrigued me and I was really eager to learn more. Unfortunately, that initial excitement is immediately curbed thanks to Emil, the game's main protagonist.
Sorry. I'm sorry.
You apologize too much. Of course, if you want to become a dog, I won't stop you.
I'm sorry. Oh.
I'm sorry too, Emil. As you can see, Emil is incredibly irritating as he gets walked on over by everybody that meets him. Like Luke from Tales of the Abyss, he is initially very unlikable due to his pathetic nature, but unlike Luke, Emil takes forever to become likable, and for some, he never gets there. But unfortunately, Emil is not the only irritating member of this cast. The female lead of the game, Marta, is nearly equally as bad as Emil. She comes off almost as a horny teenage slut as she desperately attempts to make Emil fall for her. Most of these attempts are shallow and really made me annoyed with her, although she becomes likable much sooner than Emil does. Then there is Richter. Does he remind you of anyone? Anybody at all? Yeah, Richter is basically a blatant Kratos ripoff, but he fails miserably in the role. And like all the other characters, Richter doesn't get any real character development until the end of the game, but by then, you won't really care. At least the original cast from Symphonia returns, but plays minor roles and are only playable for a portion of the game. Ultimately, the story and the new characters fail to become interesting till way too late in the game. The main appeal of this game will be to see what happened to the previous game's protagonist. But enough about the botched story, let's move on to the gameplay. Dawn of the World's gameplay fares better than the plot and characters, but not by a whole lot. At this point, everyone will know what I'm going to say, but say it with me. The gameplay is the same tried and true formula that we have seen in past games. However, this time we get to use the Wii Remote and Nunchuck as controllers, which brings in mixed results. For the most part, this control setup works well. However, there are many motion-based minigames spread throughout your adventure that are more frustrating than intuitive. They all end up feeling tacked on. What is most puzzling is that there's no option for Gamecube controller support, which feels like a missed opportunity as Symphonia controlled comfortably, and the Wii Remote and Nunchuck option feels kinda awkward. But as I said earlier, for the most part the combat is familiar. It's basically the same as what we've seen previously in Tales of the Abyss. However, there is a special attack option which is unique to this game. Think of it like a limit break from Final Fantasy. It's a bar that fills up as you fight, and when it's full it allows you to unleash attack that always hits and does considerable damage to your enemies. But this bar fills up ridiculously quickly. You'll be able to abuse this special attack button multiple times throughout your battles, making fights easier than they should be. But even though the battles are easy, they're still fun. Another strange design decision is that the original Symphonia cast can only serve as temporary party members. They come and go as the story dictates, and their levels and equipment are locked. When they're not present, you can have monster companions join your party in a manner similar to Dragon Quest V. They randomly join you when defeated and can level up and evolve into more powerful forms. Sadly, they can only be controlled by the computer. So if you plan on playing with friends, you'll only be allowed to control Emil and Marta, unless you have a member of the Symphonia cast in your party, that is, until they leave. And another strange decision is that there's no explorable overworld, like in Tales of the World Radiant Mythology. The overworld has been replaced with a small map that you can select destinations from, which are limited to towns and dungeons. And this really cheapens the experience of the game, as you are now forced to progress from area to area, making Dawn of the New World feel rather linear. Ultimately, the gameplay is a mixed bag that some will be okay with and others will hate. I for one don't appreciate all the strange changes they made. It makes Dawn of the New World feel like an average JRPG at best, and a mediocre Tales game. Anyway, getting back on topic, in terms of the graphics and visuals, the game looks pretty standard for a Wii game. The character models are more realistically proportioned like in Abyss of Vesperia, but characters and environments have an overall pretty lackluster textures, and I know the Wii is capable of more. But the game has a pretty good soundtrack, with composers Motoi Sakuraba and Shinji Terama behind it. The game's music is pretty good, with some familiar tracks from Symphonia returning and some pieces that are pretty good at setting the mood, and a couple songs which sound a little grating. But aside from the music, the overall sound and voice acting is incredibly mixed. The original voice cast from Symphonia is absent, and the cast that performed in Tales of the World Radiant Mythology returns, with the exception of Cam Clark. God bless Cam Clark. For the most part, the new cast does a pretty good job in their roles, but I'm sure most can agree that Scott Menville was sorely missed as Lloyd. As for the newcomers, they do an acceptable job with the exception of Emil. Now, I like Johnny Young Bosch. He was a Power Ranger and he's a great voice actor in his own right. However, I cannot stand his portrayal of Emil. He sounds far too pathetic. And yes, I know the character's supposed to be this way, but it's way too much and it'll leave you hating the character. He also sounds a little ridiculous as Emil's angry Dr. Hyde form. He sounds like a character in Dragon Ball Z, but I digress. In the end, I have mixed feelings about the overall performance of the voice cast, and especially that of Emil, but to each his own. In the end, I can't truly recommend Dawn of the New World, as its poorly paced story, weak characters, frustrating controls, and Emil's voice really soil what would only be an okay Tales experience at best. There are much better Tales games out there. If you're still interested in buying the game, it usually sells between $20 and $30 online, and cheaper in stores, but it can be tricky to find like Vesperia. Now, I know some people hate this game, and I know others defend it, but I think we can all agree that Tales of Symphonia Dawn of the New World pales in comparison to previous Tales games, especially when compared to the original Tales Symphonia. But unless you're truly keen on more Symphonia, be warned that there are many strings attached to experiencing this game. Well guys, that's all I have to say about Dawn of the New World, but if you're still hell-bent on buying it, it will be available in the HD collection Tales of Symphonia Chronicles, which will be coming out in North America for February 25th, 2014. But as always, thanks for watching and stick around for next time as I review Tales of Grace F for the PlayStation 3.